Okay, we're getting close to 0 hour, and according to the program, I am the Honorable George H. Cope. So, first of all, it's obviously great to have everybody here. There are going to be other folks drifting in. One thing we know about labor management relations, everybody's very flexible, very informal, very civilized. So we have no problem. I would like to say that 1 year ago tomorrow, we had a marvelous event at Georgetown Law School, celebrating, honoring, recognizing success stories in collective bargaining. Fast forward today, we've seriously elevated that event. First of all, we're here under the auspices of the White House. They're calling this a summit, and we have two distinguished cabinet officials who are with us today. It's my honor and great privilege to introduce the new Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez. I'm going to give Tom the briefest introduction he has ever received, and I dare say it will be the briefest one he ever will receive. Tom is a fabulous person. Tom believes in, supports, and advocates collective bargaining. This is Tom.
George, you know what? Thank you, man. I love that introduction, George. That's it. George, I just went to say thank you to your wife for sharing you with us for so many years. There's a rumor going around that you're going to retire, George. I frankly don't believe it for a minute.
I've tried
because
4 times.
You have so much gas in the tank, and I'd like to start out by thanking you for your remarkable service. This guy, I mean, where do we start? Oboe players, baseball players, disputes of great import to our nation. You have a remarkable ability to bring people together. People who have strongly held views, they're often divergent, but you've managed to do it through all these years, and you have been a role model. And your belief in collective bargaining, and you saw the president yesterday reiterate his belief in the importance of collective bargaining. You have been a role model for so many of us, George. So I want to start out by saying thank you to you for the work that you do. Yeah. You know, it's an honor to be here. My name is Tom Perez. I have the privilege of serving as the Secretary of Labor, and I am so honored to be here, not only myself, but with my colleague, Seth Harris, whom you all know very well, with another colleague, part of the Maryland Mafia, John Porcari, the Deputy Secretary of Transportation, who's in the back. And I'm particularly honored to introduce someone that I have become fast friends with, Penny Pritzker, and I'm going to introduce her in a few moments. You know, the president talked yesterday about the defining challenge of our time, which is to make sure that everybody has those ladders of opportunity so that they can realize the American dream. And that as we grow our economy from the middle out, that we make sure that everybody does have those chances to grow, to get the skills they need to compete, to make sure that we work with businesses, to grow businesses, to make sure that we understand the demand needs of businesses. And Penny and I have been traveling around the country talking about this together. And sometimes people are surprised. I've not seen the Labor Secretary and the Commerce Secretary together this often. But we think it's critically important because we're doing what you're doing. You have managed through the partnerships that we are elevating today to make sure that we are addressing the critical needs of our time, the critical needs of growing our economy, the critical needs of having labor, management, everybody working together, the critical need to put aside those false choices. The false choice which says we either take care of our workers or we take care of our shareholders. We've seen that categorically rejected in the partnerships that we're doing today. The critical false choice that says, you know, in the teacher context, unions are part of the problem. They're not part of the solution. Well, I will tell you as a former member of the Montgomery County Council and a proud consumer of the Montgomery County Public Schools, and you're going to see that today, unions and the leadership, the superintendent, working together to build a world-class system of education, a system in which our children, my 3 children, including Seth's children, including, are prepared for the challenges of tomorrow. We're all in it together mode. We see the building trades understanding more than anyone that these partnerships are critical in building the pipeline of tomorrow's workers. I was in Milwaukee and Chicago yesterday. I visited manufacturers in Wisconsin, and they told me something that's been sticking in my mind all night. The average age of someone in manufacturing in Wisconsin is 59 years old. We've got to build tomorrow's workforce. And by the way, the average age of a Latino living in Wisconsin is 17. So we have tomorrow's workforce. It's in the school system in Milwaukee and the surrounding areas. But we need to work together to make sure that we're in it all together, that we're empowering people with the skills to compete. That's why Secretary Pritzker was traveling to Germany recently to learn about the apprenticeship model, because we know there's so much we can learn from here. We know there's so much we can learn from the building trades and the partnerships that they've had with Disney and others. And that's why today is so important, because we reject these notions that you have either take care of your workers or take care of your shareholders. We reject the false choice which says that we either have job growth or job safety. I was at the Ford plant in Louisville a couple weeks ago, and they are producing more cars than any plant in North America right now. 4 years ago, there were 900 employees there. They were almost shuttered. Today, 4,400 strong and growing. A remarkable partnership between the UAW and the Ford leadership. They are back. And I remember asking the workers 2 weeks ago, what do you want me to tell the president? And they all said to a person, thanks for believing in us. Thanks for taking that chance. Thanks for investing in that partnership. And we've seen that partnership work at Ford. We've seen other international partnerships of great interest. And I see Mary Beth Cahill here and others. As we go to Germany, we see the VW Works Council partnership, another model of everybody in it together. These are the models that we should be studying globally. These are the models that we should be thinking about exporting to the United States, because there are so many remarkable things going on in this country, and that's what today's event is about. Lifting up these partnerships that are going to attack and address what the president said yesterday about growing the economy from the middle out, making sure that everybody has those ladders of opportunity, making sure that we are creating skilled employees that are responsive to the demand needs of employers. That's what it's all about. And it has been such an unmitigated privilege in this job to travel the country and to see these partnerships at work, to travel to New York City and look at SEIU 1199 and see how they're working with the healthcare industry hand in glove to make sure that they're building that pipeline of healthcare workers that will ensure that tomorrow's and today's needs are met. Aligning themselves with educators, community colleges, K-12 systems, so that we know that the jobs of tomorrow are going to be filled by the remarkable human capital that exists in this nation. And that's what today is about. Today, we are going to lift up these remarkable partnerships, labor and management working together, not relitigating any of yesterday's challenges, but looking forward, looking to the future, understanding that we're all in this together, that we all succeed when we all succeed, but we all succeed only when we all succeed. That's what this day is about. I am bullish about our future. Whoever says manufacturing is dead hasn't been to Wisconsin, hasn't been to Louisville, hasn't looked at the data from the Census Bureau. Whoever says that we don't have the capacity to compete hasn't looked at the partnerships that we are lifting up today, hasn't looked at other partnerships that exist across this country, hasn't seen the remarkable work of the labor movement, hasn't seen the remarkable work of enlightened employers like Ford and others, manufacturers across this country. The good news is that everywhere Secretary Pritzker and I go, everywhere other secretaries go, we hear that we want to continue to grow our businesses. That's the good news. One of the biggest challenges is making sure that we have the skilled workers to compete. That's why the work in Montgomery County is so important. That's why we want to shine it up, because we have short-term challenges. We have longer-term challenges. The secondary school system. That's why we have $100 million grants, like our Career Connect grant, which is helping to make sure that we build that pipeline for tomorrow and make sure that those opportunities do exist. So I'm thrilled to be here. And I'll tell you, George, you are a role model for so many folks. I hope that I can accomplish 1/10 of what you've accomplished in your career, because you really have done a remarkable amount of work for this nation, not simply for one part of this nation. So I want to say thank you to you. And I'm thrilled about this day. I'm looking in this audience. I see a lot of old friends. I see remarkable people doing great work here. And I have the honor of introducing my good friend, Secretary Pritzker. I've told you about the work that she has done. And one of the things in which she has really been a national leader is in understanding the issue of skills. I was in Chicago yesterday before I went to Milwaukee, and I visited a place called Skills for Chicagoland's Future. I met with workers who had been unemployed for some time, and as a result of the work of Skills for Chicagoland's Future, they're now working in jobs that are paying great wages. They have upward mobility opportunities, and this nonprofit, the board chair until recently, was a woman named Secretary Pritzker, who understood that we need to match the demand side with the goals of workers. And we don't want to simply provide opportunities for a few. We want to expand opportunities for everyone. And aligning the needs of employers with the desires of workers, finding these win-win solutions, that has been why we have been working so much together. Because just as you are modeling behavior in partnership, we want to do the same as an administration. That's why we are breaking down so many stovepipes. We work together. We're all in this together if we're going to grow this economy. Everyone together, and that's why we travel in packs. Aside from our insecurity. We travel in packs because people's problems aren't uniquely stovepiped to one department or another. And if we're not solving problems in concert, we're not going to solve problems over a sustained period of time. And so that is why we're here today together. That's why if you were in Anne Arundel County recently, you would have seen us together with union leaders, with business leaders, with educators, with nonprofits, talking about how we build our economy from the middle out, how we ensure that employers have the workers they need with the skills they need, how we ensure that workers have the ability to climb those ladders of opportunity. And we're going to continue to do this together, just as I know that all of you here, whether you're working on apprenticeships, whether you're working in SEIU 1199, whether you're teaching people, whatever you are, we are all in this together. And so it gives me a great honor to introduce my friend and colleague, Secretary Pritzker.
Wow. It's hard to follow that energy, but what I will say is, first of all, thank you for having me here, George and Secretary Perez. It is an honor to be able to speak in front of this group. This is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. As Secretary Perez said, in 2010, 2010, but in 2009, when the president first came into office, I was sitting with the chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, and I said to him, look, I would like to be of assistance. The campaign's over. I'd like to be of help. Let's talk about areas where I can be of help as I stay in the private sector. And he and I talked about the real issue of skills, the skilled workforce, and the challenges of people being able to find opportunity, and did they have the appropriate training. And I said, you know what, I'm all over that. And what I can do is I can go out to the business sector and I can use my contacts to really get greater insight into what's going on and where we could work together. And we met with union leaders, we met with business leaders across 8 different sectors of our economy in 2009. And in 2010, the president announced an effort called Skills for America's Future. And it was the beginning of a real dialogue. I think we were in this room when we announced it, and it was a beginning of a real dialogue of awareness of something you all know, which is that we have a great labor force in this country, and it's an enormous asset to our country and to businesses. But at times, we have individuals who don't have the skills that they need to have the jobs that are open. And so for me, this has been a passion, not for the last 20 minutes or the last couple of months, but a passion since 2009 that I've been very focused on. And Skills for Chicagoland's Future is just one of the programs that we started from scratch to address the issues of skilled labor. We also did a program working with community colleges and unions and businesses to better align workforce training in across the country with companies like United Technologies or the Gap or PG&E out in California, and really began this effort to raise awareness. And one of the things that's so exciting for me in my new job is that a couple weeks ago I rolled out the Department of Commerce's agenda, our Open for Business agenda. And one of the priorities that I outlined, absolutely brand new to the Department of Commerce, is to be focused on the skilled workforce and a skilled labor force. That's never happened before where that's a priority of the Department of Commerce. And it's absolutely essential. It's essential for many reasons, and it's going to be it's a passion of mine. And the reason it's essential is during my first 100 days, I went around the country and I met with leaders all over in 12 different states, hundreds of leaders, business leaders, union leaders, mayors, governors, etc., talking about what's going on in the business community, what's happening in commerce, what are the challenges you're facing, what can we do to be of greater assistance as the federal government. And everywhere I heard the challenge that is being faced around lack of skilled labor. Now, I'm not saying that is the only challenge in our economy. I'm just saying it was one of the issues that I heard from the leadership that I spoke with. And so it's quite obvious in going out and talking with people, this is a challenge. It's something I knew from my own experience as a business person, but I also knew from my own experience in working on this subject since 2009. But then the other really phenomenal part is, I think it was the first week that Secretary Perez was in office. He picked up the phone, he called me, he said, let's have lunch. And I think we had lunch 2 days later. And he said, I want to work together on this issue of what do we do about making sure that our labor force has the right training and the right skills and the right education in order to be able to meet the jobs that are out there both today and in the future. And I said, I am all in for that. And he and I, that's been since, the last 4 or 5 months, we've been joined at the hip on this subject, which I know some people would say it's quite unusual to have the Secretary of Labor and the Secretary of Commerce so closely allied. But we are all in together on this subject, and frankly, it's easy. And one of the things that makes it so easy is what you just saw, the passion that Secretary Perez has for this subject. It's infectious, and I'm a pretty high-energy person, although I was not going to jump over this thing up here. I said doing it in heels might be a little awkward, as he did, but don't just because I walked around doesn't mean I don't share the absolute enthusiasm and passion for this subject, and that I'm not willing to go to whatever lengths it takes to make us successful in this issue. The challenge that we're facing, as I see it, is there are really good programs out there. Many of you in this room run great programs, great training efforts. And so they exist. That's one thing we know. The second thing that we know is that we need to do more of it. And so the questions that we've been asking ourselves, and that in fact last week we had a cabinet meeting on this subject, a group of cabinet members got together to talk about this, and the question we are asking ourselves is, what is the role of the federal government? How can we be more of assistance, given the fact that skilled training has to occur locally, and it has to occur with a partnership between local business, local unions, and local training providers. And that successful programs, we know, are what we call demand-driven. We're no longer, as the Secretary always says, and I quote, we can no longer afford train and pray. We have got to put people in a position where they are being trained for the jobs that exist with the skills that they need, and we owe our workforce stackable credentials and good career paths and clear clarity about how you achieve that. Much of that doesn't seem to be uniformly understood, except I believe we're at a real tipping point with this subject. And the tipping point is business really gets they need to step it up. They can no longer just expect you all and the training organizations to deliver a worker that has exactly what they need. And I feel that's part, of what my job in this partnership is to get business to step it up and realize they have to play a greater leadership role in skilled training and be clearer about what they need, and also get over some of the phobias that we've seen of, let's say, hiring folks that have been unemployed for greater than 6 months. These are some of the challenges, real challenges out there that we saw in Chicago in dealing with the longer-term unemployed, is this sort of bias against that. And the reality is we're breaking down those biases by demonstrating that we can help train someone and they can be as successful in a job as someone who's been unemployed for over 6 months as someone who you're just stealing from your competitor or taking from some other job. That isn't helping the unemployment situation. So for me, this is a really, really important effort. It's one that, as I said, I've made as a high priority for the Department of Commerce, and one that, frankly, it's an absolute pleasure to partner with Secretary Perez on, because as he and I have commented on other subjects, sometimes we may come from opposite sides of the coin, but we are one coin, and we do see what we have to do together. And so our commitment, you should view as unwavering. And I hope that that by us being here together, that you will feel that the Commerce Department is a partner with you in this effort around training and helping to deliver to our workforce the kind of training that they need, as well as delivering to our businesses the kind of competitive workforce that they need to be successful. And what we know is that I called Steve Case. Steve Case, who very, very successful entrepreneur, has started many, many companies, including AOL. And I asked him if he would help me with this effort. And he said to me, absolutely, I'm all in, because he said, we are in a global talent war. And the country that has the best talent and who takes care of their talent and their human capital is the one who's going to win. And he got it completely. And so for me, this is something that comes from my heart. It's something I know is right. I think it's a win-win-win for everybody, this effort. And so I'm really pleased that you all are focused on workforce training and the skills effort today in this context. It's something that cannot be underestimated, the importance of this. And so I hope that, in closing, let me just say, it's an absolute pleasure for me to be here. I'm told I think I'm the first Commerce Secretary to come to such a summit or meeting, and I hope it's not the last time that you'll invite me, because this is something I care very deeply about. And Secretary Perez, It's a pleasure to get to work with you regularly on a number of things, and this particularly. And George, thank you for all you've done for our country. It's really important work, and I know that you're attempting to retire for the fourth or fifth time, but and we hope you're modestly successful at that if that's what you want, but don't leave us in a lurch, please. So thank you.
Okay, I believe some of Penny's words may actually be quoted to her in the near future by a number of people in this audience, which I think would be appropriate and to be expected. I am a creature of habit, and every time I've addressed any group in the last 4 years and 2 months, I start by saying the same thing. First of all, welcome on behalf of the FMCS in general, and in particular, Deputy Director Scott Beckenbaugh and Allison Beck. The FMCS, as the director, has the most unique job in the federal government. I have no board, I have no commission, I report to no one, I do what I please, and no one knows what the hell I'm doing. So, that alone would put me in a very unique category. But let me remind you, there's something quite more unique when you compare the FMCS with virtually any other government agency in the United States and perhaps in the world. Why is that? I have no enforcement authority. I have no regulatory authority. I cannot require anybody to do anything. We live and exist on requests from joint parties to help and assist them going forward. We are therefore the only agency in which, when we knock on the door and say, we are here from the government and we are here to help you, we are telling the truth. We are telling the truth. So let's talk about what's going to unfold here. What's going to unfold here, I think you're going to all find to be quite fascinating. You're going to hear from people in nationwide bargaining units. You're going to hear from people from smaller bargaining units. You're going to hear from construction industry, manufacturing industry, healthcare industry, entertainment industry. You're going to hear about the need for diversity, the need for skilled workers. You're going to hear about the real world. So when you combine what you're going to hear about in today's panels with what we did at Georgetown last year, I have a message to convey. My message is real simple. Collective bargaining is not dead. Collective bargaining is alive. The problem is we need to get more people to do it well, And hopefully the message you're going to get today is going to help you understand how people on the ground have done it well. I have, over the course of my career, synthesized all the things I've heard as to how to practice it well into 5 simple principles, which I hate to share publicly because I then have nothing else to say for the rest of my life. But here they are. 1, everyone is going to know in this room, relationships, relationships, relationships. 2, mutual respect, notwithstanding parties have strongly held competing views. 3, never losing your eye off the ball. Do you want an agreement? And if you are committed to wanting an agreement, and if in that context, number 4, if you're prepared to share relevant facts and information, transparency in its full bloom, then all you're lacking is number 5, the single most important, and everyone in the room knows this. Do you come into bargaining with a problem-solving mentality? Do you understand that if management says it has a problem, it is in fact a problem for the union and the working men and women who it represents? And conversely, if the union looks at management and says it has a problem on behalf of the people it represents, management has a problem. So stop beating your breasts on all your preconceived notion of what's going to happen, because we all know and understand the day that this great process begins is the day that uncertainty sets in. But I would like you all to compare the 5 principles that I've just described, juxtaposed about what you're going to hear today. I think you're going to hear that theme, those themes repeated time and time again. My last philosophical point is as follows. 83 years ago, the United States Congress declared that the key component of our national labor policy was encouraging the practice and procedure of collective bargaining to either eliminate labor strife or to minimize the effect of strikes or other stoppages on the nation's economy. There are people, some of whom are actually legislators, who would either like to have that erased or don't believe it exists. But the truth of the matter is, notwithstanding all the legislative initiatives in this past 5 decades, those words in their full glory are still in the national labor policy, and that's what we're all about here today. So we're now ready for the panels. The question is, I'm looking, do I jump down or not? I have jumped down in the past and been seriously injured. So I'm going to walk around here because before the panel, I wanted to say one thing that I know you'll all be aware of. Of all the labor disputes, I've had the pleasure of working with in the last 4 years, one of them by far has stood out. And that was the dispute between the United States Maritime Alliance, a multi-employer organization representing some of the world's most powerful shipping companies, and various port terminal operators, and the ILA, a bargaining unit representing over 14,000 longshoremen around the country. There was a serious strike set for September 30, 2012, and our organization, I'm delighted to say, was asked to come in and help facilitate that. What was at risk was probably the greatest risk that I know has existed, at least in the last 4 years. That is to say, every single port from Maine to Florida on the Atlantic coast and all the Gulf Coast ports were in jeopardy of being shut down. And with it, the national economy would have been put in a very, very disastrous situation. Apart from the fact that if you looked at your calendar and realized that it was only 90 days before Christmas and the impact on the retail industry and every single family in the United States, all that was at risk. The Department of Transportation was concerned. The Maritime Administration was concerned. All sorts of private consumers were concerned. The Obama administration was concerned. And I would now like to introduce the 3 gentlemen who played the lead role in working their way through and ultimately getting a 6-year master agreement covering all those working men and women and all those ports. Harold Daggett, President ILA, please stand and join me, Harold. Jim Capo was then the CEO and chair of USMX, and Dave Adam, his worthy successor. So So here's a quick story. Pre-September 30, the critical moment for the strike, these parties, with the assistance, these are not shrinking violets, ladies and gentlemen. These are not shrinking violets. It took me, Scott Beckenbaugh, Jack Sweeney, and Pete Donatello to try to work our way through what was going on in this fascinating, difficult time. But there were bad days. Collective bargaining was not at its best. There were days when collective bargaining was at its worst. But the beauty is there was always collective bargaining. And when we got to that key moment on September 30th, these parties stepped forward and said to the public, for the good of the country, we will forego any labor dispute, and entered into a 90-day extension. And as we got to the late extension period, December 29th, another landmark agreement was reached, which enabled the parties to keep the bargaining process going, and it culminated finally in a negotiated master agreement and then all the ratification process. So basically from August through May, that process continued. After it was over, I sat and spent many hours thinking to myself, how did we ever get an agreement? How did it ever come about? What is the lesson for this meeting? I had this meeting in mind, as you'd expect. And the lesson is threefold. First point, leadership, leadership, leadership. Each of these groups had large number of people, powerful people, with their own individual thoughts and ideas, big surprise, right, of how to handle things, what should be done, what should be accepted, what should be rejected, what should be counterproposed. But the leadership that these three people brought forth carried the day along with principles number 2 and 3. They never lost sight of the ultimate goal. They wanted a collective bargaining agreement, and they got it. And lastly, every time we hit what looked like a brick wall, no matter how smart Cohen, Beckenbaugh, Donatello, and Sweeney are, we realize that we're up against a brick wall. What the hell is going to happen now? Ingenuity and practical solutions carried the day. So on behalf of the FMCS, the administration, and the nation, thank you guys.
Thank you, George. Thank you.
Thank you.